So you're going to start by taking a little bit of your raw umber or whatever color you chose, adding some turpenoid to it, and mixing it into sort of like an inky consistency to start drawing. When you're drawing, keep things loose. Notice how I'm not trying to make the whole circle in one motion. I'm using shorter, almost more linear movements to mark out the sphere. Then you want to mark out your different sections. What's the highlight? What's the midtone? What's the shadow, the cast shadow, and the reflected light? Remember this from Art 1, it never, ever, ever goes away. Mix a pile of paint using your palette knife that corresponds to each value. So you should have 5 values that correspond to your planes. Make sure that your piles are going in order from darkest to lightest. This is just so you can keep your palette organized. There are lots of different ways you can start your painting. Some people start with the darkest value, some people start with their lightest value. I'm starting with my second lightest value so that I have a little bit of contrast, but at the same time I don't want this color to get tainted by the darker ones. Then I'm going to go a little darker, starting to block in that bottom sort of mid-tone shadow. Bringing it up and around. Adding in my darkest shadow onto the sphere. Smoothing all that paint out with my palette knife. The palette knife is more flexible than you think. Really use all parts of it. The paint should be fairly thick, but not globs of paint. You can kind of feel it should be smooth when you're spreading it out. What you don't want to do is scrape. So there needs to be plenty of paint so that you're not scraping and that you're smoothly pushing paint around. Putting in that dark so you can really see now that the sphere is starting to pop and become three-dimensional. Don't be a perfectionist about this. I know it's really easy to want everything to go in the shape exactly, but it's just not possible. So do your best, but remember we're still going to go back in and paint and go back in and paint and smooth things out with a brush. It's very important to include your background. The background is never a throwaway because the background is ultimately what's going to help define your object. But don't just assume that the background is all one color. Really look at what's happening to the right or the left of the object and think about capturing that tone precisely. And this is going to change. In some areas it's probably going to be light, and in some areas it's going to be black, but again, this is all about seeing. So you could definitely leave your painting just as a palette knife painting. In some ways, I kind of prefer it. But at this point, if you would like, you can go ahead and smooth things out with a larger brush. I recommend using a flat brush, and in between your strokes, blending your edges and making them soft. Be sure to clean off your brush with a paper towel or towel. If you don't clean it off, then it's very likely that you might pollute some of the areas with another color and taking away from the definition. So make no more than 2 strokes with the same brush and then clean it. 2 or 3 strokes max, clean your brush. Going over those edges, softening them, refining, adding more highlights and more shadows if you need to, and getting everything to be as smooth as you want. But the benefit of using the palette knife is that now you actually have enough paint to smooth out as opposed to just scraping, drawing with a brush instead of painting and smoothing with a brush. Another thing you should be doing is that if something looks wrong, fix it. So for example, I can see that my cast shadow shape is a bit off. I'm going to go in and modify that so that it's correct. It's never too late to make it right.